Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. We've got a lot to cover today because the weather pattern is shifting in a big way, and February is looking much more active than what we've seen lately. If you're thinking winter's winding down, think again. Things are about to take a turn, and I'm here to break it all down for you. Let's start by looking at what's happening right now. If we pull up the satellite imagery, you can see our latest storm system that just moved through Texas and Arkansas over the past couple of days. This system brought some pretty heavy rainfall to parts of the South and is now pushing eastward, bringing more rain to the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic. We're going to be watching this closely because a squall line is expected to develop later today. That's going to mean a strong band of thunderstorms sweeping through parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, and continuing into the overnight hours. Some of these storms could get quite strong with gusty winds, heavy downpours, and even an isolated tornado threat, especially as we move into the late afternoon and evening hours. The Florida Panhandle is also in for some rough weather as this line pushes through. Meanwhile, farther north, Kentucky, Ohio, and Pennsylvania are already getting hit with steady rainfall. And as this system continues moving northeast, we'll see more rain spreading into the mid-Atlantic and northeast. Most of this will stay as rain, but as colder air moves in, we could see some of this precipitation transition to snow in northern Pennsylvania and parts of upstate New York. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. While that system is moving east, we have an even bigger storm slamming into the west coast right now. This is a classic atmospheric river event with a mid-latitude cyclone pulling in deep tropical moisture from the Pacific and slamming it into the Pacific Northwest and Northern California. These setups can be incredibly impactful, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and feet of snow in the mountains. Over the next couple of days, this system is going to bring rounds of heavy rain to coastal areas and lower elevations, while the higher elevations of the Cascades and Sierra Nevada will get absolutely buried in snow. Flood watches are already in effect for much of Northern California and Southern Oregon, and with several inches of rain expected, flash flooding and landslides will be a big concern. Meanwhile, in the mountains, some areas could see snow totals exceeding 4 or 5 feet, making travel extremely difficult, if not impossible. If we zoom out and look at the Pacific, you can see just how massive this system is. The moisture plume stretches all the way back toward Hawaii, which tells us this is a strong and well-organized system. And speaking of Hawaii, the Big Island is actually under a winter storm watch right now. Yes, it does snow in Hawaii, just at the highest elevations. The summit of Mauna Kea is expecting blizzard-like conditions with wind gusts up to 85 mph and as much as 10 to 15 inches of snow. It's pretty wild to think that while some parts of the country are dealing with record warmth, the highest peaks of Hawaii are getting buried in snow. Looking ahead, this active pattern isn't going anywhere anytime soon. The West is going to stay stormy through at least Tuesday, with more waves of heavy rain and snow continuing to impact California, Oregon, and Washington. Meanwhile, across the eastern half of the country, we're going to see a strong push of warm air as we head into the first few days of February. A strong zonal flow is setting up, which means the jet stream is moving almost straight west to east, allowing warm air to flood in from the Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico. Temperatures are going to be running 15 to 25 degrees above normal in some areas, which means places like Texas, the Southeast, and parts of the Mid-Atlantic could be feeling more like spring than winter. But don't get too comfortable with the warm weather because big changes are on the horizon. Right now, we're seeing a ridge building over Alaska, and whenever that happens, it usually means colder air is about to push southward into the U.S. This warm spell is temporary, and by next weekend, we're going to see Arctic air starting to make a comeback. One of the big things I'm watching right now is what's happening in the stratosphere. The polar vortex, which is the massive area of cold air swirling around the Arctic, is starting to stretch. That's why that's important, because when the polar vortex is strong and compact, all that cold air stays locked up near the North Pole. But when it stretches or even splits, it allows frigid air to spill southward into the U.S. We're seeing signs that the vortex is weakening, which could mean a much colder pattern for the second half of February. Another clue we can look at is Europe. A lot of times when we see colder air move into Europe, the U.S. follows suit a week or two later. And right now, Europe is about to get it with a major cold spell, which tells us that we could be looking at a similar setup heading our way in the near future. So what does all this mean? Well, for the next week or so, we'll have this warm spell across the south while the west continues to get hit with heavy rain and snow. But by next weekend, that warm ridge starts to break down and we'll see Arctic air beginning to push south. The first signs of this will show up in the northern U.S. with colder air returning to the Great Lakes, the Midwest, and the northern plains. But as we go deeper into February, that cold air is going to keep pressing southward. Eventually, we could be looking at it, snow returning to places like Iowa, Missouri, and even parts of Virginia and North Carolina. Along with the rain and snow, winds are also a factor, especially along the coast. Coastal areas, including parts of California, Oregon, and Washington, are experiencing gusty winds today, with gusts up to 40 mph in some places. These winds will ease a bit later in the day, but it's still a good idea to secure loose items and be cautious if you're venturing outdoors in coastal regions. The really exciting part of the storm system is the atmospheric setup in place with the negative Pacific North American of an X coming into play. For anyone who's a fan of winter weather and snow, this is a key piece of the puzzle. A negative PNA pattern tends to bring colder air into the Pacific Northwest and the western U.S., allowing snow to accumulate at lower elevations and for the mountains to see more of the white stuff. So over the next week, expect snow to continue to accumulate in the mountains with resorts like Stevens Pass, Crystal Mountain, and Mammoth Mountain benefiting from these systems. It looks like the snow tolls could continue to pile up, making for excellent conditions in the high country. Meanwhile, further south, California Central Valley and lower elevations are looking at rain, possibly mixed with snow in the higher parts of the region. While snow won't be common in places like Fresno or Sacramento, areas above 3,000 feet, like the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, will see a few inches of snow. This is good news for the state's drought conditions, as it adds much needed moisture to the region. As the storm system moves inland, places like Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana are getting hit by snow in colder conditions. The higher elevations are seeing significant snow, with some locations in Montana possibly getting 6-12 inches of snow by tomorrow afternoon. For anyone planning travel through areas like Bozeman, Missoula, or parts of Yellowstone National Park, be prepared for some snowy conditions that could create slow-moving traffic and slippery roads. Now, shifting to the central U.S., the snow and rain band continues to spread eastward, with snow already impacting the Midwest and heading toward the Great Lakes region. In states like Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, we're already seeing snow accumulation, and that's expected to increase throughout the day. While the snow isn't expected to be incredibly heavy, it's still enough to impact travel. For example, places like Duluth, Green Bay, and Traverse City are all expected to see several inches of snow before the storm moves on. In the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the snow will continue into tomorrow, with totals possibly reaching 6 inches or more in the higher elevations. To the east of this storm, in the northeast, a quick-moving snowstorm is set to bring some fresh snow to the region. From New York City to Connecticut, northern New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, the snow will start this afternoon and quickly accumulate. While the snow won't be particularly heavy, areas like Albany, Syracuse, and even parts of Boston could see 1-3 inches by the evening commute. The snow is expected to move out quickly, but that doesn't mean it won't cause any travel disruptions. Slick roads could make for a slow drive home for commuters in the region. So plan accordingly. As the system moves further east, areas like Maine and New Hampshire will continue to see snow overnight, with northern New England possibly getting up to 6 inches of snow by tomorrow morning. As the system moves out of the northeast, the weather should start to clear up by tomorrow afternoon. Expect sunny skies and a return to more typical winter conditions for the region. However, lake effect snow will continue to affect parts of the Great Lakes, including areas around Buffalo, Cleveland, and Rochester. Lake effect snow tends to bring heavier, localized snow showers. So if you're traveling in these areas, be prepared for sudden bursts of snow. Looking ahead, the weekend will bring another wave of stormy weather. A large low-pressure system will move into the central U.S., affecting places like Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and Nebraska. This system will bring rain and possibly some snow to the Midwest, along with strong winds that could cause travel delays and hazardous conditions. By Sunday, the storm will push eastward, and we'll see snow spreading into the Great Lakes and Northeast. So the potential for lake effect snow is high this weekend, with several inches of snow possible in areas downwind of the Great Lakes. Down south, meanwhile, the weather will be quite different. The southern U.S. will experience a period of warmer than usual temperatures, with highs reaching into the 70s and 80s in parts of Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. This warmer air will create an interesting contrast with the cold, snowy weather to the north, leading to a potential for severe thunderstorms and even some tornadoes in the southeast. States like Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee will be keeping a close eye on these conditions as the warm, moist air interacts with the colder systems moving in from the north. As we look further ahead into next week, the northern U.S. will see another cold snap. Expect temperatures to drop 30-40 degrees below average in places like Montana, North Dakota, and Minnesota, the southern U.S. We'll continue to see above average warmth, but with that warmth, The potential for thunderstorms, including some severe weather, is high. For travelers, it's going to be a week of rapidly changing conditions. Be sure to stay updated on the forecast as we move into the weekend and into next week, as storm systems could bring ice, snow, and rain to various parts of the country, creating tricky travel conditions. In conclusion, February is starting off with a bang in terms of winter weather, especially in the west and northern plains. Snow, rain, and colder temperatures will continue to affect large parts of the U.S., while the South sees a brief warm-up that could bring severe weather. If you're in or traveling to any of the affected areas, make sure to stay prepared and monitor weather for any updates that could impact your plans.